The city square always had a rhythm of its own in the late afternoon, not rushed like the morning commute, not quiet like the evening hours, just a steady flow of people moving between work and home. Sunlight stretching long shadows across the worn stone pavement, soft and golden. Then a cry tore through it all. It wasn't the kind of crying people were used to hearing from children. Not impatience, not frustration. This was different. Raw, desperate, uncontrolled. The sound of a child unraveling in a way that couldn't be soothed with words. 6-year-old Caleb Holloway was sobbing in the middle of the square. His small body shook violently as he clung to his father's tailored navy jacket. Fingers digging into fabric that cost more than most people earned in a week. Tears soaked through the fine material, leaving dark stains that stood in sharp contrast to the man's polished appearance. That man was Grant Holloway, a self-made real estate investor, a millionaire, a man who negotiated 7-figure deals without breaking a sweat. And yet, in that moment, he stood completely powerless. "Caleb, it's okay," Grant said quietly, lowering himself slightly, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm here. You're safe." The words floated uselessly in the air. Caleb cried harder, his breathing uneven, his head shaking from side to side as if he were trying to escape something only he could see. His eyes were squeezed shut, his face flushed and wet with tears. People began to notice. A woman walking her dog slowed down, glanced at the scene, and looked away with an uncomfortable sigh. A couple nearby exchanged a look and whispered something under their breath. Others stared openly. Curiosity mixed with judgment. Grant felt every single glance. He felt exposed, stripped of the authority and confidence he wore so easily in boardrooms. Here in public, he wasn't a powerful businessman. He was just a father failing to calm his child. He adjusted his grip, pulling Caleb closer, trying again. "We'll go home," he said softly. "We'll get ice cream, okay? Whatever you want." Nothing. Caleb's crying continued, deep and relentless, as if it were coming from somewhere far beyond his small chest. Grant clenched his jaw. A familiar sensation crept in, panic, tightly controlled but dangerous. He hated this feeling. The feeling of losing control. His entire life had been built on control. Numbers, structures, outcomes. If something broke, he fixed it. If a problem appeared, he solved it. But this was different. "Caleb, stop," he said suddenly, his voice sharper than he intended. The moment the words left his mouth, he knew he had made a mistake. Caleb flinched, then broke down completely. His sobs turned frantic, desperate. He screamed a single word loud enough to cut through the noise of the square. "Mom." The sound hit Grant like a physical blow. His chest tightened. His throat closed. 11 months had passed since his wife died. 11 months of holding himself together, of staying composed, of believing that strength meant not falling apart. And now, standing in the middle of a crowded square, everything collapsed. Grant froze. He pulled his son closer, but his own hands were trembling now. For the first time, he felt the same fear he saw in Caleb's eyes, the fear of a world that no longer made sense. Around them, life continued. People walked past, conversations resumed. But for Grant Holloway, time had stopped. In that moment, he understood a truth he had been running from since the funeral. There were wounds money couldn't heal, and his son was carrying one of them. From across the square, someone noticed. A young woman had slowed her steps. Her attention fixed not on Grant, but on the child in his arms. She didn't stare out of curiosity. She didn't judge. She listened, as if she wasn't just hearing a child cry, but recognizing something deeper beneath it. And quietly, without knowing why, she began to walk toward them. Grant Holloway had always believed that problems existed to be solved. That belief had carried him far. It had built his fortune, protected his reputation, and shaped the way he moved through the world. When something went wrong, Grant didn't panic. He analyzed. He assessed risk. He made a decision and moved forward. That was how he had survived losing his wife. At least that's what he told himself. Standing in the middle of the city square with Caleb crying uncontrollably in his arms, Grant felt that belief cracking. He shifted his weight, aware of how long they had been standing there. A quick glance at his watch, an unconscious habit, told him they were already late. He had planned this afternoon carefully. Pick Caleb up from school, walk through the square. Keep things normal. Normal. The word felt almost insulting now. Caleb's sobs had settled into a harsh, rhythmic pattern. Not calming, never calming, but predictable in their intensity. Grant had learned to recognize the stages. First, the panic. Then, the shaking. Then, the collapse. He knew what would come next if this continued too long, exhaustion followed by silence that felt worse than the crying. Grant swallowed hard. People nearby pretended not to stare, but he could feel their attention like heat on his skin. He imagined what they were thinking. Control your child. What kind of father lets this happen? Money can't buy parenting skills. He had heard versions of those judgments before, some spoken, most implied. What none of them knew was how much he had already tried. The doctors, the specialists, the child psychologists with their carefully measured voices and framed diplomas, the private school counselors who spoke about adjustment periods and emotional processing, Grant had paid for all of it. Without hesitation, without complaint, he had sat in quiet offices, hands folded neatly in his lap, listening as professionals explained grief in clinical terms. He nodded. He asked the right questions. He followed every recommendation. Routine, structure, consistency. They told him that stability was key, so Grant had become stability. He kept his voice calm, his posture firm, his emotions locked down tight. He never cried in front of Caleb. Not once. He believed, truly believed, that if he could just stay strong enough, his son would feel safe. But now, as Caleb gasped for breath between sobs, Grant felt the terrible possibility forming in his chest. What if strength wasn't what his son needed? "Caleb," he said again, softer now, almost pleading. "Look at me, buddy." Caleb didn't. The boy's face twisted in pain, his small body rigid as if bracing for impact. His fingers clenched tighter fists buried in Grant's jacket. Grant lowered himself to one knee, ignoring the cold stone beneath him. "Hey," he whispered. "It's just us. We're okay." Caleb's head snapped back slightly, his eyes opening just long enough to meet his father's gaze. And then he cried out again, "Mom." The word echoed inside Grant's skull. He closed his eyes. That was the word Grant avoided most, the one he never said out loud. His wife's name lived in the quiet corners of the house, now inside unopened drawers behind closed doors in rooms Grant passed through quickly without looking too closely. He thought if he didn't speak her name, he could keep the pain contained. But Caleb wasn't playing by those rules. Caleb needed her, and Grant couldn't give her back. A sharp wave of frustration rose in him, not at his son, but at himself. At the situation, at the cruel unfairness of it all. He had built entire buildings from nothing, negotiated with people who tried to outmaneuver him at every turn, survived markets crashing and deals falling apart. Yet here he was undone by a 6-year-old boy's grief. "Please," Grant murmured the word slipping out before he could stop it. "Please calm down." For a split second, Caleb's crying faltered. Hope flared in Grant's chest. But it died just as quickly. Caleb pulled back slightly and screamed louder, his voice breaking into sharp, panicked bursts. His face contorted red and wet, his breathing ragged. Grant felt something snap inside him. He tightened his grip, not enough to hurt, but enough to ground himself. His voice rose, despite his efforts to control it. "Caleb, you have to stop," he said, the edge unmistakable now. The reaction was immediate. Caleb recoiled as if struck. His sobs turned frantic, uncontrolled, his body shaking harder than before. Grant stared at him, horrified. He had done exactly what every therapist told him not to do. Around them, the air felt heavier. A man passing by frowned openly. Someone nearby muttered something about kids these days. Grant caught a glimpse of his reflection in a storefront window. His suit, his rigid posture, the child falling apart in his arms. He barely recognized himself. This wasn't the father he thought he was. A memory surfaced uninvited. His wife sitting on the edge of their bed months ago, her voice tired but gentle. "He doesn't need you to be perfect," she had said. "He needs you to feel with him." Grant had nodded then too. He always nodded. But feeling had never been his strength. Grant exhaled slowly, forcing his shoulders to relax. He pressed his forehead lightly against Caleb's hair. "I'm here," he whispered again, though the words felt thin now. "I'm not going anywhere." Caleb didn't respond. His crying had reached that hollow stage, the kind that sounded like it could go on forever. Grant looked around the square, suddenly desperate for an exit, for privacy, for a place where his son's pain wouldn't be on display. That's when he noticed her. At first, she was just another figure in the crowd, a young woman standing a short distance away, motionless. But she wasn't watching Grant. She was watching Caleb, not with curiosity, not with pity, with focus. Her posture was relaxed, her expression calm, no phone in her hand, no sign of impatience. Just quiet attention, as if she were listening to something others couldn't hear. Grant felt a flicker of irritation. He had no patience left for spectators. He shifted slightly, turning his body to shield Caleb from view. The last thing he needed was someone inserting themselves into a situation they didn't understand. Still, the woman didn't look away. She took a small step forward. Grant stiffened. His instincts kicked in immediately, the same instincts that had protected him in business and life. Caution, control, distance. He straightened his back and met her gaze, his expression cool and unmistakably guarded. She stopped a few feet away, respecting the invisible boundary between them. For a moment, she said nothing. Then quietly she spoke. "He's not acting out," she said. "He's overwhelmed." Grant frowned. The woman's voice wasn't accusing. It wasn't condescending. It was matter of fact. "I've got it under control," Grant replied curtly. "We don't need help." She nodded once as if she had expected that response. "I know," she said, but that kind of crying, it usually means there's something he's trying to say. Grant's jaw tightened. He had heard enough theories, enough opinions, enough people telling him what his son needed. He opened his mouth to shut the conversation down, and then Caleb's crying softened just slightly. Grant froze. The change was subtle, barely noticeable, but it was there. Caleb's breathing slowed by a fraction. His grip loosened just a little. Grant looked down confused. The woman was still standing there, calm, unmoving. For the first time since the breakdown began, something had shifted. Grant didn't know why, but he knew this moment mattered. Grant Holloway felt it before he saw it. That subtle shift in the air, the moment when a private crisis becomes public spectacle. Someone was too close. He turned his head sharply. The young woman stood only a few steps away now, close enough that Grant could see the faint wear on her shoes, the old guitar case resting against her leg. Close enough that she was no longer just part of the background. Grant's body reacted before his mind did. He pulled Caleb tighter against his chest and straightened his spine, placing himself squarely between his son and the stranger. "Stop right there," he said, his voice low but unmistakably firm. "You need to step back." The woman froze immediately. She raised her hands slightly, palms open, a universal signal of non-threat. Around them, a few heads turned. The square had gone quiet enough now that the tension was unmistakable. "I'm not trying to scare him," she said calmly. Grant's jaw clenched. "You already are." Caleb whimpered softly, his face buried against Grant's shoulder. The sound reignited Grant's panic, sharpening his words. "My son is having a medical episode," he said louder now. "This is not the time for strangers to get involved." The woman didn't argue. That somehow made Grant angrier. Most people either pushed back or retreated. She did neither. She simply stayed where she was grounded, steady, as if Grant's authority meant nothing to her. "I understand why you're defensive," she said. Any parent would be. Grant let out a short, humorless laugh. "You don't understand anything," he snapped. "You don't know my son. You don't know what he's dealing with." She nodded once. "You're right," she said. "I don't know him." Then she looked down at Caleb. "But I recognize the sound." Grant stiffened. "What sound?" he demanded. "That cry," she replied. "It's not fear. It's panic layered on grief." Grant's heart slammed against his ribs. "That's enough," he said sharply. "You need to walk away. Now." For a moment he thought she might. She hesitated just long enough for Grant to believe he had regained control of the situation. Then she spoke again. "When my brother cried like that," she said quietly, it meant he was reliving the moment he lost her. Grant's breath caught. Caleb's sobs faltered. Not stopped. Not even softened completely, but disrupted. Grant felt it in the way Caleb's body shifted. In the slight pause between breaths, he looked down at his son, startled. Caleb's grip loosened just a fraction. His head tilted as if his body were responding to something his mind hadn't fully registered yet. Grant looked back up, alarm flashing across his face. "What did you say?" he asked. The woman met his gaze. "I lost my brother," she said, "and I made that exact sound when it happened." Her voice didn't waver. No theatrics. No attempt to evoke sympathy. Just truth. Grant shook his head. "This is inappropriate," he said. "You're projecting your trauma onto my child." A few people nearby murmured. One man frowned openly now. Another woman whispered to her companion. Grant felt the familiar surge of humiliation. Not again. Not here. Caleb let out a sharp sob, but it was different this time. Shorter. Less frantic. Grant noticed. He hated that he noticed. Caleb, Grant whispered urgently. "Look at me, buddy, look at me." Caleb didn't. His eyes were half open now, unfocused but not panicked. His gaze drifted past Grant's shoulder toward the woman. Grant felt his stomach drop. "No," he said instinctively, turning slightly to block Caleb's view. "Hey, stay with me." The woman took a careful step back, sensing the shift. "I'm not trying to take his attention from you," she said. "I promise." Grant laughed again, sharp and brittle. "That's exactly what you're doing." Caleb made a sound then. Not a cry, not a word. A small broken exhale. Grant froze. He had learned every pattern of his son's distress over the past year. He knew the rhythm of escalation, the signs of collapse. This didn't fit any of them. The woman crouched slowly, lowering herself to Caleb's level without moving any closer. "My name is Iris," she said softly. "You don't have to talk. You don't even have to look at me." Grant's pulse roared in his ears. "I said stop," he warned. "If you don't back away, I'm calling security." Iris looked up at him, not offended, not frightened, just earnest. "If you want me to leave," she said, "I will. Immediately." She paused. "But before I go, I want you to notice something." Grant bristled. "What?" She nodded gently toward Caleb. "His breathing," she said. Grant looked down despite himself, and his chest tightened. Caleb's breathing, still uneven, had slowed. The sharp, gasping sobs were gone, replaced by quiet hiccups. His shoulders no longer shook violently. His body had softened against Grant's. Grant felt dizzy. This wasn't possible. I haven't done anything, Iris said quietly. I haven't touched him. I haven't distracted him. She reached into her bag. Grant's heart leapt into his throat. Don't, he barked. She stopped instantly, hands visible again. It's just an instrument, she said. I won't use it unless you say yes. Grant scanned the bag, his instincts screaming. He saw the edge of metal worn smooth by use. A harmonica. He exhaled sharply, anger and confusion tangling in his chest. This is unbelievable, he muttered. You think music is going to fix this? Iris didn't flinch. No, she said. I think memory might. Grant stared at her. What does that even mean? She answered without hesitation. Grief lives in the body, she said, not the mind. Sometimes you have to speak to it where it lives. Caleb made another sound, soft this time. Grant felt his arms tighten involuntarily. The entire square seemed to be holding its breath. People had stopped pretending not to watch. Phones were lowered. Conversations had died. Grant felt cornered, exposed. He hated it, but he couldn't deny what was happening in his arms. 30 seconds, he said, suddenly surprising even himself. That's it. Iris nodded. She didn't rush. She lifted the harmonica slowly, deliberately, as if asking permission one last time. Grant didn't stop her. She played a single note, soft, low, barely audible, then another. The melody was simple, almost childlike. No flourish, no performance. And yet something shifted. Caleb's body went still. Not stiff, still. His hiccups faded. His hands relaxed completely. His head lifted slightly, his eyes opening wide for the first time since the breakdown began. Grant felt a chill crawl up his spine. The sound cut through the square like a thread of light. Caleb stared at Iris transfixed. Grant forgot to breathe. The harmonica fell silent. Iris lowered it slowly. Caleb reached out. His small hand extended toward her, tentative, unsure. Grant's instincts screamed danger. He tightened his grip but stopped himself. Caleb's fingers brushed Iris's sleeve. The contact was gentle, brief, but it felt monumental. Grant's chest ached. No therapist had done this. No medication. No carefully structured routine. A stranger had stepped forward and the world had shifted. Grant looked at Iris, his voice barely above a whisper now. How did you do that? Iris met his eyes. I didn't, she said. He did. Grant felt something break open inside his chest, and for the first time since his wife died, he was terrified of what the truth might be. The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy, thick, as if the entire square had leaned forward listening. Grant Holloway was still holding his son when the last note faded into the air. His arms were tense, locked in place, afraid that if he moved even slightly, the fragile calm would shatter. Caleb didn't cry. He didn't speak either. He simply stayed still, his small body resting against Grant's chest, eyes wide and fixed on the young woman in front of him. Grant felt his heart pounding so loudly he was sure others could hear it. This wasn't relief. Not yet. It felt like something had been opened. Iris lowered the harmonica slowly, as if afraid the sound might echo back if she moved too quickly. She didn't smile. She didn't look around to see who was watching. Her attention remained on Caleb. I'm going to stop now, she said gently. You're safe. Caleb didn't react. His gaze stayed locked on her face, his expression unreadable somewhere between confusion and recognition. Grant swallowed hard. Caleb, he whispered. Buddy. No response. A flicker of panic rose in Grant's chest. This wasn't normal either. He shifted his weight, adjusting his hold, and that was when he felt it, a slow, deliberate breath leave Caleb's body. Not a sob, not a gasp. A breath. Grant's throat tightened. He hadn't noticed how long it had been since his son last took one calmly. Caleb's head tilted slightly, his eyes blinking as if waking from a dream. Then, in a voice so quiet Grant almost missed it, Caleb spoke. It sounds like Mommy. The words landed with devastating force. Grant felt them before he understood them. A deep, sharp ache bloomed in his chest, spreading outward like a crack through glass. What Grant whispered. Caleb didn't look at him. She used to hum, the boy said softly. At night. Grant's breath caught. He remembered. He remembered the way his wife used to stand in the doorway at bedtime, one hand resting against the frame, humming low and steady. Not a song from the radio, not anything formal, just a sound, something between melody and comfort. Grant had never paid much attention to it. At the time it had felt small, ordinary. Now it felt enormous. Iris's expression shifted subtly, not triumph, not surprise. Recognition. That's why it worked, she said quietly. It wasn't new. Grant looked at her, his voice unsteady. You didn't know her? He said. It wasn't an accusation. It was disbelief. Iris shook her head. No, she said, but I know that sound. Grant stared at her. How? She hesitated. The square felt impossibly still now. Even the traffic noise seemed distant, muffled, as if the city itself had stepped back. I know it, Iris said slowly. Because when my brother was sick, my mother used to hum the same way. Grant's chest tightened further. She didn't sing words, Iris continued. She said words made it harder, so she hummed instead. Caleb shifted in Grant's arms, his fingers curling into the fabric of his father's jacket again, not in panic this time, but in grounding. Grant felt it, felt the difference. He lowered himself onto the edge of a stone bench without realizing he was doing it. His legs felt weak, untrustworthy. Iris remained standing. She didn't move closer. That restraint mattered more than Grant wanted to admit. Why now? Grant asked hoarsely. Why would he remember this here? Iris glanced around the square. Because grief doesn't follow logic, she said. It follows triggers, sounds, places, moments when the body feels overwhelmed. Grant looked down at Caleb, who had rested his head against Grant's chest. Now eyes half closed. He didn't forget her, Iris continued. He just didn't have a way to reach her. Grant closed his eyes. For the first time since his wife's funeral, he allowed the memory to surface fully. The hospital room, the machines, the way she had looked at Caleb even when she barely had the strength to lift her hand. Grant had stood there stiff and composed, telling himself someone had to be strong. But maybe that had been the moment everything broke. I tried to protect him, Grant said quietly. I thought if I stayed steady, he would feel safe. Iris nodded. That makes sense, she said. But safety doesn't always come from steadiness. Sometimes it comes from being seen. Grant opened his eyes. Caleb stirred slightly, then shifted his body so that he was sitting more upright in Grant's lap. He looked at Iris again, studying her face with the intense seriousness only children possessed. Can you do it again? Caleb asked. Grant's heart jumped. He looked instinctively at Iris, then back at his son. Caleb didn't sound desperate. He sounded curious. Grant hesitated. Every part of him that valued control, boundaries, predictability was screaming to end this now, to take Caleb home, to restore order. But there was another part of him now new, fragile but unmistakably present, the part that had just witnessed something he couldn't explain. If you want, Iris said gently. Only if you want. Caleb nodded once. Grant took a slow breath. Okay, he said quietly. Just sit there. Iris sat down on the low stone ledge opposite them, careful to keep distance. She brought the harmonica to her lips again, but this time she didn't play immediately. She waited. Grant watched tense his body, ready to intervene if needed. Then Iris began to hum, not into the harmonica, just with her voice, low, soft, almost imperceptible. The sound wasn't musical in any technical sense. There was no performance to it, no attempt to impress. It was intimate. Grant felt something twist painfully in his chest. The hum filled the space between them, wrapping gently around the square like a blanket. Caleb's eyes fluttered closed. Grant froze. His son's breathing slowed again, deeper this time. His shoulders relaxed completely, his head sinking against Grant's chest with a weight that felt real present. Safe. Grant felt his throat burn. The sound unlocked something he had kept buried deep. He saw his wife again, not sick, not fragile, but standing in their kitchen late at night, humming as she washed dishes. He heard her in the hallway in the nursery in moments he had taken for granted. He had thought he was protecting himself by not remembering. He had been wrong. A tear slipped down Grant's face before he realized it. Then another. He didn't wipe them away. For once he didn't care who saw. Caleb stirred. Daddy, he murmured. Grant looked down quickly, panic flaring. I'm here, he said immediately. Caleb opened his eyes just enough to see his father's face. You're crying, Caleb said. Not alarmed, just observant. Grant let out a shaky breath. Yeah, he admitted. I am. Caleb studied him for a moment. Then he leaned forward and rested his forehead against Grant's chest. It's okay, the boy said quietly. Mommy cried too. Grant felt his heart break open completely. Iris's humming slowed, then faded. She watched them with quiet reverence as if witnessing something sacred. Grant held his son, tears falling freely now. He didn't try to stop them. He didn't apologize. For the first time since his wife's death, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of the loss, without armor, without distance. The square remained silent. No one spoke, no one interrupted. Strangers stood frozen, aware that something deeply personal was unfolding in front of them. Grant didn't care. All that mattered was the small body in his arms. I miss her, Grant whispered, voice breaking. Every day. Caleb nodded sleepily. Me too, he said. Grant kissed the top of his son's head, holding him tighter, not to restrain him, but to share the moment. When Grant finally looked up again, Iris was standing now, adjusting the strap of her bag. I should go, she said softly. Grant's heart clenched unexpectedly. Wait, he said quickly. Please. Iris paused. Grant searched for the right words. I don't understand what just happened, he said honestly. But thank you. Iris met his eyes. This wasn't about me, she said. It was about him. And you. Grant nodded slowly. I still don't know how to do this, he admitted. I don't know how to help him. Iris considered that. You don't have to know everything, she said. You just have to stay. Grant looked down at Caleb, who was now half asleep, calm, in a way Grant hadn't seen in months. I think, Iris added gently, this is only the beginning. Grant felt a strange mixture of fear and relief settle over him. Beginning. The word lingered. For the first time since the loss that had shattered his world, Grant Holloway understood something with aching clarity. His son's grief hadn't needed fixing, it had needed permission. And now that permission had been given, there was no going back. Not to silence, not to pretending. Whatever came next would demand more from him than control ever had. And as Grant held his son in the fading light of the square, he knew without certainty, without guarantees, that everything was about to change. The calm didn't last. Grant knew that much about grief. It came in waves, retreating just long enough to give the illusion of control before returning with greater force. The stillness in Caleb's body felt precious fragile, as if a loud word or a sudden movement could shatter it. He adjusted his hold, slightly careful not to wake his son. Caleb slept now. Not the restless, exhausted sleep that followed his breakdowns, but a deep, even rest. His breathing was steady against Grant's chest. His small hand still curled into the fabric of Grant's jacket. Grant hadn't realized how long it had been since he'd felt that. Across from him, Iris stood quietly, as if unsure whether she still belonged in the moment she had helped create. Grant cleared his throat. You don't have to leave, he said. His voice sounded different to his own ears, less guarded, more exposed. Iris hesitated. I don't want to overstep, she replied. He's asleep. That's what matters. Grant nodded slowly. Yes, he said. But this mattered too. Iris met his gaze. Grant searched for words that didn't come naturally to him. What you did. He continued, choosing each word carefully. No one else has been able to do. Not doctors. Not therapists. Not me. Iris looked away, uncomfortable with the weight of his gratitude. I didn't fix anything, she said. I just recognized it. Grant frowned. Recognized what? She took a breath. That place, she said, where pain sits when it doesn't have language yet. Grant felt a chill move through him. He shifted his gaze to the square, watching people begin to move again. Life resuming around them. The moment of stillness had passed, but something irreversible had been set in motion. You said earlier, Grant said quietly, that you'd heard that cry before. Iris nodded. Grant waited. She didn't rush. My brother's name was Mateo, she began. He was 8 when he got sick. Grant stayed silent. We didn't have much, Iris continued. My mom worked 2 jobs. My dad left when Mateo was 4. Hospitals were intimidating places for us. Her voice remained steady, but Grant noticed the tension in her shoulders. Mateo used to cry at night, she said. Not loud at first. Just enough to wake me up. He'd try to be quiet so my mom could sleep. Grant felt something tighten in his chest. He'd hold his breath when he cried, Iris said, like he thought he was doing something wrong. Grant looked down at Caleb instinctively. Iris followed his gaze. That's what I heard in your son, she said softly. Not fear, shame. Grant closed his eyes briefly. When Mateo got worse, Iris continued. My mom stopped singing. She said it hurt too much. Grant listened, unmoving. So I did it instead, Iris said. I didn't know songs. I didn't know how to fix anything. I just hummed. She paused. And it worked. Not every time, but enough. Grant opened his eyes. And when he died, he asked, his voice barely audible. Iris swallowed. It stopped working, she said. For me, Grant felt the weight of her words settle between them. I dropped out of school after that, Iris continued. Music school, I mean. Every note felt like a lie. Like I was pretending nothing had been taken. Grant nodded slowly. He understood that kind of withdrawal. So when I hear that sound, Iris said, I know what it means. It means something unfinished is screaming to be acknowledged. Grant exhaled slowly. That's what Caleb's been doing, he said. Screaming. Yes, Iris replied. And you've been trying to quiet him. Grant flinched. I was trying to protect him, he said defensively, from falling apart. Iris didn't argue. I know, she said. Most parents would. Grant looked at his son again. I thought if I stayed calm enough, he admitted he'd follow. Iris tilted her head slightly. And did you ever let him see you break? The question landed like a blow. Grant opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. He didn't need to explain. No, Iris said gently. You didn't. Grant's jaw tightened. I didn't want to scare him, he said. He'd already lost his mother. I couldn't let him think he was losing me too. Iris nodded. That makes sense, she said. But to a child, silence can feel like absence. Grant felt something crack open inside his chest. He remembered the nights he stayed in his office long after Caleb had gone to bed. The mornings he'd kissed his son's forehead quickly, efficiently before meetings. He'd been present, but he hadn't been available. I thought, Grant said slowly, that grief was something you survived by managing it. Iris shook her head. No, she said. You survive it by sharing it. Grant felt the truth of that settle into him. A sudden thought surfaced, sharp and unsettling. "You said you didn't know my wife," Grant said. Iris looked up. "No," she replied. "I didn't." Grant studied her face. "But you knew the sound," he said. "You knew what to do, and you were here. Today. At exactly this moment." Iris exhaled softly. "Sometimes," she said, "the right moment finds you, whether you're ready or not." Grant wasn't satisfied. "There's more," he said. Iris didn't deny it. She reached into her bag, not abruptly this time, and pulled out a folded piece of paper worn soft from handling. She hesitated before offering it to him. Grant took it carefully, mindful not to wake Caleb. The paper was old, creased. "What is this?" he asked. "A note," Iris said. "Your wife wrote it." Grant's breath caught. "That's not possible," he said automatically. She didn't give it to me," Iris interrupted gently. "She left it with a volunteer at the hospital." Grant's heart pounded. She said. Iris continued, "If you ever see a little boy who cries the way mine might one day cry, give this to his father." Grant stared at the paper. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakable. His wife's. Grant felt the world tilt. He read silently at first, then out loud without meaning to. "If you're reading this, it means I wasn't there to help anymore." Grant's voice broke. Iris looked away, giving him privacy. "Please don't mistake calm for healing. Our son doesn't need you to be unbreakable. He needs you to be honest." Grant's vision blurred. "If he cries, let him. If you cry, let him see it. Love is not control, it's presence." Grant lowered the paper, his chest aching. "She knew," he whispered. "She knew I would do this." Iris nodded. "She was afraid you'd disappear behind strength," she said. "So she asked the universe for help." Grant let out a shaky laugh. "And the universe sent you." Iris smiled faintly. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe it just sent a reminder." Grant folded the note carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket close to his heart. He looked down at Caleb sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. "I don't know how to change overnight," Grant said quietly. Iris met his eyes. "You don't have to," she said. "You just have to start." Grant nodded. A decision formed, not fully, not clearly, but real. "Would you," he asked hesitantly, "be willing to come with us for a bit? Just sit nearby?" Iris considered the request. "I don't want him to depend on me," she said. Grant shook his head. "He won't," he said. "He'll depend on me. I think I finally understand that." Iris studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "Okay," she said. "For now." Grant felt something shift again. Not the dramatic change of moments earlier. Something quieter. Something lasting. As he stood carefully lifting Caleb into his arms, Grant knew the truth he had been avoiding. This wasn't the end of his son's grief, but it was the end of running from it. Grant Holloway had spent most of his adult life believing that emotions were something you handled privately. Pain belonged behind closed doors. Fear was something you managed alone. Grief, if it had to exist at all, should be contained, controlled, and invisible. That belief had kept him functional. It had also kept him distant. As he carried Caleb out of the square, the weight in his arms felt different. Not heavier, more real. His son's head rested against his shoulder, warm and steady breath, slow and even. The kind of sleep that came not from exhaustion, but from release. Grant walked carefully as if the slightest misstep might wake him. Iris followed a few steps behind, quiet, unassuming, careful not to intrude. No one spoke. The city resumed its rhythm around them. Cars passed. A bus sighed as it pulled away from the curb. Somewhere a street vendor laughed. Life continued. And yet Grant felt as though he had crossed an invisible line. They reached the car without incident. Grant opened the back door, gently easing Caleb onto the seat. The boy stirred, but didn't wake. His fingers tightened briefly around Grant's sleeve, then relaxed again. Grant froze, heart pounding. He waited. Caleb's breathing remained steady. Grant exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. He straightened slowly, closing the door with care. Iris stood nearby, hands tucked into the straps of her bag. "I can walk," she said softly, as if sensing Grant's hesitation. "You don't have to." "No," Grant said immediately. The word came out sharper than he intended. He softened his tone. "Please stay." Iris nodded once. The drive was quiet. Grant sat in the back seat beside his son, one hand resting lightly on Caleb's chest, feeling the rise and fall. He didn't check his phone. He didn't think about meetings or deadlines or anything waiting for him beyond that moment. He just stayed. As the car moved through the city, memories surfaced without warning. Caleb as a toddler falling asleep against his chest. His wife smiling at him from the doorway, that same quiet hum filling the room. The way he used to promise himself there would always be time later. Later had come and gone. When they reached home, the house greeted them with its usual stillness. Clean. Orderly. Too quiet. Grant carried Caleb inside up the stairs and into his bedroom. He laid him down carefully, pulling the blanket up around his small shoulders. Caleb stirred. Grant froze again, but this time his son didn't cry. Caleb opened his eyes, slightly unfocused. "Daddy," he murmured. "I'm here," Grant said instantly. Caleb blinked slowly, then frowned as if searching for something. "Did I scream?" he asked. Grant felt his throat tighten. "Yes," he said honestly. "You did?" Caleb looked embarrassed, his face flushing. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "I couldn't stop." Grant sat down on the edge of the bed. "I know," he said. "You don't have to be sorry." Caleb studied his face. "You cried too," Caleb said. Grant nodded. "Yes," he said again. "I did." Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he said something Grant hadn't expected. Grant felt his chest ache. "Why?" he asked gently. "Because," Caleb said slowly, "it means you miss her like I do." Grant closed his eyes. When he opened them again, there were tears there. He didn't hide them. "Yes," he said. "I miss her very much." Caleb reached out his small hand, touching Grant's cheek. "That's okay," Caleb said, echoing words Grant had never taught him. "Mommy said, crying doesn't mean you're broken." Grant felt something inside him collapse completely. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead to the edge of the mattress, his shoulders shaking as the grief he had kept locked away finally broke free. He didn't sob loudly. He didn't fall apart dramatically. But he cried deep, honest tears that came from a place he had sealed off for far too long. Caleb watched him, not frightened, just present. After a while, Grant straightened, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "I'm sorry," he said automatically. Caleb shook his head. "No," he said. "Don't be." Grant laughed weakly. "Okay," he said. "I won't?" Caleb smiled sleepily. "Can you stay?" he asked. Grant didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said. "As long as you want." Caleb closed his eyes. Within minutes he was asleep again. This time, Grant stayed. He sat in the dim light of the bedroom, listening to his son breathe, letting the quiet settle around him. For the first time in nearly a year, the silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like space. When Grant finally stepped out of the room, Iris was waiting downstairs, standing near the window. "He's sleeping," Grant said quietly. Iris smiled faintly. "I figured," she said. He let go. Grant leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. "So did you," Iris added gently. Grant looked at her. "Yes," he admitted. "I think I did." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Grant spoke again, his voice low but firm. "I've been doing this wrong," he said. Iris didn't interrupt. "I thought being strong meant not breaking," Grant continued. "I thought if I stayed in control, he wouldn't fall apart." He shook his head. "All I did was teach him to cry alone." The words hurt to say. Iris met his gaze. "But you didn't today," she said. Grant nodded. "No," he said. "I didn't." He took a breath. "I want to do better," he said. "Not tomorrow. Not eventually. Now." Iris waited. "I don't want him to feel like his pain makes people uncomfortable," Grant said. "I don't want him to think he has to be quiet to be loved." He looked up at her, eyes steady. "And I don't want to keep hiding from my own grief." Iris's expression softened. "That's a hard promise," she said. "I know," Grant replied, "but it's one I intend to keep." A pause. Then Grant added, "I want you to stay for dinner." Iris blinked. "I don't want this to become dependency," she said carefully. Grant nodded. "I understand," he said. "This isn't about replacing anyone. It's about helping him and me learn how to feel again." Iris considered that. "Okay," she said. "For tonight." Dinner was simple. Grant ordered takeout, something warm and familiar. They ate at the kitchen table, the house no longer echoing with emptiness but filled with quiet conversation. Grant talked about Caleb's mother for the first time in months. Not clinically, not carefully, but honestly. He spoke about her laugh, her stubbornness, the way she used to hum without realizing it. Iris listened. Later that night, after Iris left, Grant sat alone in the living room. He pulled the folded note from his pocket again. "Love is not control. It's presence." Grant stared at the words for a long time. Then he made a decision, one that scared him more than any financial risk ever had. The next morning, Grant canceled his meetings. All of them. He called Caleb's school and really explained what they were going through. He scheduled time with a therapist, not for Caleb, but for himself. And when Caleb woke up and asked if they were going to the square again, Grant smiled. "Yes," he said. "If you want." Caleb nodded eagerly. Grant understood then. This wasn't about fixing his son. It was about walking with him through grief, through memory, through whatever came next. And for the first time since his wife's death, Grant Holloway didn't feel like a man holding himself together by sheer will. He felt like a father learning how to stand in the truth. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It never did. There was no dramatic moment where everything suddenly became easy. No morning where Grant Holloway woke up and realized the grief was gone. Loss didn't work that way. It lingered, shifted, softened in some places while remaining sharp in others. But something had changed. Grant noticed it in the small things first. Caleb no longer froze when he felt the sadness coming. When his chest tightened or his eyes filled, he didn't panic the way he used to. He looked for his father instead of turning inward. And Grant for the first time didn't try to rush the moment away. He stayed. Some afternoons they returned to the square, not because it was easy, but because it mattered. They would sit on the same stone bench, watching people pass, listening to the city breathe. Sometimes Caleb talked about his mother. Sometimes he didn't. Grant learned that both were okay. Iris joined them occasionally, never intruding, never positioning herself at the center of things. She understood her place in the story. She was not there to replace anyone, only to remind them how to listen. Caleb began taking music lessons slowly without pressure, not to become talented, not to perform, just to explore, to find a way to express what words still could not hold. Grant watched his son's fingers move across the keys one quiet evening, hesitant but curious, and felt a sense of awe he had not expected. Not pride, gratitude. Grief had not taken everything. Grant changed too. He stopped measuring his worth by productivity alone. He left work earlier. He turned down meetings that did not matter. When Caleb needed him, he did not calculate the cost he showed up. And when the grief returned, as it sometimes did, Grant did not hide from it. He let it move through him. One night, months later, Grant found himself sitting alone in the living room after Caleb had gone to sleep. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt empty. He pulled out the folded note one last time. Love is not control. It is presence. Grant folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer beside his bed. He no longer needed to read it every day. The words had become something he lived. Iris eventually moved on. Not abruptly, not dramatically. She found her way back to school, to music, to a life that belonged fully to her. When she left, there were no promises made, no debts implied. Just gratitude. The last time they met at the square, Caleb hugged her without hesitation. "Thank you for listening," he said simply. Iris smiled. "You taught me how to listen better too," she replied. Time passed. Caleb grew older, stronger, more confident. The memory of his mother did not fade, it changed. It became something warm instead of painful, a presence rather than a wound. And Grant Holloway, once a man defined by control and silence, became something else entirely. A father who knew that strength was not the absence of tears. It was the courage to let them fall. On a quiet afternoon, Grant and Caleb sat together on the same bench where it had all begun. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the square. Caleb leaned against his father, content. "Daddy," he said softly, "I think Mommy would like this." Grant smiled, resting his hand over his son's. "I think so too," he said. The city moved around them. People passed, conversations rose and fell, and in the middle of it all, a father and son sat in quiet understanding, no longer trying to outrun their grief, but walking beside it. Because healing, Grant had learned, was not about forgetting. It was about remembering together. This story reminds us that real strength is not about hiding our pain. It is about showing up even when it hurts. Sometimes healing begins with a simple act of kindness from someone we least expect. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you believe kindness can change lives, do not forget to subscribe to Tales of Kindness for more stories that inspire compassion, healing, and hope.